Well, I'm glad everybody's able to make it this morning and show up. I do have an old friend of ours that's joining us, Michael. Um, Michael and I, our history, our paths go way back to the old Robbins days with Janice and others. Um, and I'm glad Michael was able to join us today because his I don't know, his resume on climbing is amazing, pretty vast, and just amazing soul. And we've kind of lost track with each other, but man, I'm glad we're kind of reconnecting a little bit. And he's got a lot that whatever he'd like to share with us is going to be, gratefully appreciated. So, yeah, very lucky to have. But yeah, anyway, just so we're going to kind of change lanes a little bit, get into more rock climbing. Our cross country skiing and snowshoeing portion just sort of finished up week before last. And we had a cross country ski outing that was scheduled for this next coming Saturday, but not much snow up there. I mean, you could find a big patch and just kind of hang out in it. Morning, Patty.
Hey.
It's so good to see you.
Howdy.
Yeah, hi.
Yeah, I got gray hair now.
Oh yeah, well at least you got hair. So I know, isn't it crazy how things change? Yeah.
There's a lot of dangerous things about getting old,
I hear you. I one of them is the fact of not getting old, right? So we don't want that.
There you go.
But no, I'm just kind of introducing everybody and just kind of talking a little bit about sort of the history of climbing. We were kind of finishing up on the cross country skiing and snowshoeing, but I just on a positive note, I did get a report on the snowpack of the Sierra, which down here in this area we kind of look at it as very bleak and horrible and everything, but the actual snowpack for the Sierra is at 95% of normal.
It's not as bad as you think.
Yeah, I think because I think Northern California is saving us a little bit.
Yeah,
they're doing pretty good. So on that note, I mean, hey, there's not much for us to do down here, but at least it's there. So very good. Anyway, everybody, I think everybody here knows Janice. Janice and Patty and I all used to work at REI or at the Robbins shop here in Fresno back in the day. So there's some more connection that goes back way back. And so it's, we lost track of each other for a long time, but man, I see these faces and I'm like, oh man, we could just step right in and just connect right back up where we left off. So
yeah, we had lots of good times.
Oh, lots of good times. And Michael and Patty's climbing history, I'm really glad they were, especially being able to join us for this one, is immense, and everything that they can add and stories and experience and stuff. It's a lot. There's a lot there, and amazing resumes there. But anyway, let's go ahead.
Michael just said, if we can remember it.
Right. That's the goal, right? That's what it's all about, is just hanging on to what we those memories and stuff. If you guys, Patty, you and Michael, want to just kind of talk about some of the stuff that you guys have done and sort of the interesting parts, just to kind of get caught up a little bit.
Sure. Real brief history. I first came to Yosemite in 74, I guess. And so, wow, okay, here's my new home.
Yeah.
And, been actively climbing up until maybe 8-10 years ago. I had a bad year of several leg injuries that kept me off the rock, and I was not disciplined enough to keep my upper body strength during that time. So after a year, I was just sort of depressed about that and said, it's too much at this age to get back. And so I have sort of walked away from climbing. Part of my mental history that keeps me happy, but I don't do it anymore.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well,
What about you?
I
Yeah, go
remember
ahead.
first meeting you. I was working at the Robin shop,
Yeah.
and I got fixed up with this dude from back east, who only climbed on a single rope, and I'm like, what the hell, Well, using the So, so we met up, and we did okay.
Yeah, you did. Yeah, you did. Yeah, and some of the climbs, I saw a post from Paul talked about you, Michael, and you guys doing El Cap, and
Yeah, we did the nose together once.
yeah,
A lot of climbing with Paul, of course.
yeah, yeah. And I had a chance to climb. I think I only climbed with you guys once, one or two times, and I think it was over at Glacier Point Apron. We were playing around over there one day, and I think Mel was up there with us.
Yeah.
And some of that group. Now, were you guys part of the Fresno Big Wall Society, or did you get it, that old thing?
Hey, base core, that's
Yeah.
me.
Yeah, yeah.
In fact, we just in Christmas they still have an annual reunion, so to speak, at David Sears and Ann Sears's place, and so we had that annual.
We get together once a year at least, and several people are still climbing.
That's great. Oh, that's so great. That's so good to hear. And then I know Michael, we were talking the other day, and you're still getting out on your canoe, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not an active whitewater boater anymore, but it seems every year somebody comes up with a good permit that I can't refuse an invite on. So last year did the Middle Fork of the Salmon, and we'll see what happens this year with the permits.
Yeah. And so Travis, he's converted over from whitewater kayaking to open top. So he's doing a bunch of that. And then Michael, you were saying that you're out on your mountain bike quite often, and Patty, you're out riding around on your horses. And
I do four-wheel drive on a four-legged creature.
There you go.
It's a little faster.
Yeah. Right?
Well, it's
uphill,
but not downhill.
We ride together a lot, and it's a rabbit and hare thing, where she's faster going uphill, and then I catch up and pass, and so forth.
That's awesome.
That's so awesome. That's great. That's great.
Yeah, and if you hear people out there riding horses that don't want to be around bikes, then they're making a big mistake.
Yeah.
Because bicycles and horses go very well together.
Well, that's awesome. I never really looked at it that way, but yeah, it kind of makes sense. The horses that I really run into now are going to be up, a lot of pack horses up in the Sierra and stuff.
Yeah.
Patty, I don't know if you remember my uncle, who was a horseshoer, and he would go up to the Muir Trail Ranch and twice a year and shoe all their horses. So he was, and he did that for 35 years or so. And so that's kind of my horse connection. And then, just our osmosis from you at Robbins, so, well, that's good stuff. I'm going to go ahead and get started just on the presentation portion of it. And then we'll, and just chime in. I mean, throw some stuff, because there's some stories. This is mostly just going to be sort of a slideshow thing on some of the, I guess, sort of the initial big names and primarily Yosemite climbing, because that's sort of our proximity to stuff. I don't really know much about East Coast climbing or things like that. And so that's, we talk about what we know. So, right. There you go, Travis. Travis should chime in with that. All right. So let's see how this thing goes. It's always an adventure. Oh, well, first thing right off the bat. Okay, let me do this. Thought I had this queued up, but I didn't.
No, Janice.
Well, while you're getting that queued up, I'll mention I got my start in Northeast New England. So
Oh yeah.
yeah, the Gunks, New Hampshire.
That's my jam right there. I love it.
Yeah.
Look,
Yeah,
Travis.
Travis-
Where are you from, Travis?
I was born in New Jersey, but I lived up in Vermont. I lived in New Hampshire. I climbed all in the Gunks. I climbed all in, like, going up to Owl's Head, going into the Whites, and doing all sorts of fun things up there.
All right. Good.
Well, we're gonna have to get together and have a sit down and talk about all that. For sure. I love this. I love the fact there's a connection like that. So kind of going way back to climbing, very initial, before it actually became its own little entity. It's all one of the, I guess, one of the phases of mountaineering, which would also include, ice climbing or skiing or scrambling, what have you. Ice, climbing was all part of the early stages of mountaineering. Basically what it was is whatever it took to get to the top of something, and whether you had to rope up, whether you had to like I said, just scramble or what have you, just it's all part of that same bit of it. And then it's evolved into different parts, different entities, I guess, or different sort of strategies. And with free climbing is pretty traditional. It's basically you're just using the rope and protection as a backup. You're not using it to make your way or make any progress using that. And so this actually happens to be this is my son doing a little, I'm not even sure. I think he's in Yosemite, but I'm not sure. Not sure exactly with that route, but rope and gear and protection is just as a backup. I hope he's got a piece in there pretty soon. His ropes looks pretty still right there. So free climbing, like I said, a lot of people, you look at you say free climbing, they think of free soloing, but it's completely different. Talk about aid, which basically you're using, there might be blank sections of rock that you would use, and you need to get past, and it's just really not climbable. And so this is mostly used to connect pieces of routes, although there are routes that are pretty much all aid. So depending on your level, and you guys throw anything out there too. Any experiences that you've got. Maybe it's like, aid climbing sucks, or I love aid climbing, or whatever. So feel free to just chime in and even just rip my pictures up all the way. By the way, that is a picture of me back. Anyway, go ahead, Travis.
I was going to say aid climbing is amazing for a couple different reasons. A lot of it uses literally hooks that hook into the rock. You don't.
Oh yeah.
That rope just being above you means there's a fixed line above you. But when you aid climb, you are typically taking a simple hook and you are hooking it onto a little chip of rock and putting all your weight on a little hook that is just hooked in there. It's definitely a very, very sketchy, very scary thing, but you are fully trusting your gear more than you could ever imagine.
Exactly. Yeah, there's a lot of different variables to aid climbing. Like you said, Travis, everything from just putting on a little hook on a little flake and standing on it, or something that you're just not able to climb, physically yourself. So a lot of things to kind of take into account there for sure. Michael, and Patty, have you done much aid climbing? Have you done a lot?
I'll agree with Travis. It's scary.
Yeah, yeah, right.
I was a free climber was my predominant, you know, that's what I loved.
Yeah.
But would use the aid climbing, like you said, as a little connection point, you know, sometimes on the nose, there's mostly free, but it can be all free, but I never did it completely.
Yeah.
And I followed it free. But at any rate, the aid climbing is scary. I did come from an engineering background, and probably 40 years ago, I machined a buckle for an adjustable atria, a rope ladder, instead of the traditional ones.
Yeah.
Because you could make it the whole atria so much smaller, lighter, quicker to incorporate. So hence the transition from free climbing to aid to back. I found it easier with that. And nowadays, I think that you can commercially buy such things.
Yeah. Oh, that's I didn't realize that. That's really cool. I love that. Then we talk about free soloing, which is, you know, very dramatic, high consequence. And you know, so basically it's like bouldering, but on a big wall. You're just basically just have rope, shoes, no harness, high risk, obviously. So that's a different category. And then bouldering, which is just find something to go do. And I'm kind of partial to this because it's one of the few shots that I have all my kids actually in the same picture. So, and I love the fact that, you know, they're all just kind of spottingly on the doing this little bouldering move. And I think Carson just showed her how to do that. And a lot of fun. And you can kind of do this sort of anywhere you can find, you know, a little chunk of rock to play around with. And I mean, even that one, at first you wouldn't even look at, well, what am I going to do with this? Well, there's ways of playing around, so forth. And then later on, with the advent of, you know, climbing walls and then sport climbing on sport routes on some of these areas, which basically have fixed protection pieces. So recent form of climbing is sport climbing, where rope is protected, and non-traditional form of climbing with rope protection from either the climber or top roping setup, large boulders, slabs, and in climbing gyms, so forth. This has really introduced a lot of people into climbing, but what I'm hoping, and I was hoping more, because I'm looking at everybody here, and almost everybody has got a little bit of outdoor experience, is helping some of these sport climbers transition to the outdoors, because they're really, once they start having to fix their own pieces and set their own stuff, and plus there's a lot of gear involved, there's a lot of expense involved, and a lot of people are a little bit anxious about making that transition over into outdoor climbing. But it would be great if we could get some of those people that are going to the gym multiple times a week, get them out to where they can actually, you know, enjoy, you know, climbing outdoors.
I give the same words of advice to every new climber I've ever met, and it's always climb with someone that is better than you. And I give them 3 reasons why to climb with someone that is better than you. Number 1, they're better than you. They're going to teach you things. Number 2, they've already spent all the money to buy all the gear. Awesome. 3,
Yeah.
they're going to take you to cool, unbelievable places that you haven't been to, and you're safer in that regards. And that's a really cool thing. So my advice every single time a new climber is getting into it is climb with someone that is better than you. And if you're the better climber, awesome, but that's not usually the case. So definitely big.
No, I think that's really good advice. And to be one of the reasons why I even started this whole Moonshadow group, because I look back, you know, at my 20-year-old version of myself, sort of lost in the world, not really knowing what I wanted to do, didn't really have much of a direction. And I stumbled somehow up with this guy, cross paths, And we started talking, and he was looking for, well, he was always looking for a kayaking partner, and he's also looking for a climbing partner, and he was looking for a backpacking partner. And so we were talking, and I don't know if it was maybe my sense of humor, maybe it was my lack of experience, and maybe he just felt sorry for, I don't know. But one of the first things he says, "Hey, do you want to go climbing?" And I didn't know enough to say no. And so I said, "Sure, what?" Yeah, and he goes, "Great, I've got all the stuff." And he did. He had the gear, like you just said, Travis. He was by far better than I was, because I was, bottom of the barrel on that. And he was going to take me to these places. So here I am with all three of Travis's prerequisites. And the next thing you know, he's got another group of people, like 3 or 4 other people with us. And I didn't know anything about climbing. He just said, "Okay, you need to get this, and you need to get this, and you need to get this by next Saturday." And I said, "Okay." And so headlamp, because he didn't get into details. I didn't know we were going caving. So the next thing we know, everybody stopped in the middle of this trail. I don't see any rock walls anywhere. And everybody stopped, unloading their backpacks, putting harnesses on, doing all this stuff. And I'm looking around but this is weird. I don't know what's going on here. And come to find out, around the corner was this iron gate that he had keys from the forestry department. And we went caving for 8 hours. So the next weekend, he goes, how did you like that? And I says, "That was amazing." I says, "But I'd love to do this outdoors." And so the next weekend, he says, "Great. Have you ever been to Yosemite?" And I said, "No. I mean, I've heard of it, but I don't know anything about it. I've never been there before." He says, "Well, great. We're going to go to Yosemite and go climbing next weekend." And I'm like, "Okay." And he said, "Here's what you need," and gave me a short list. I mean, he had shoes for me. He had a harness for me. I really didn't have, I just needed to bring some food and some water. And same group of guys, and we went and climbed Cathedral Peak. So there's my first 2 climbs, and I'm like, okay, I kind of dig this. I kind of see that this is going to change me. And so 40 some years later, here I am. And in the meantime, he taught me how to kayak. We did a lot of backpacking, and he just laid the groundwork. So back to where I'm at this point in my life, if I could be Kevin to anybody and motivate them to maybe expose them to something that could be life-changing, I'd be happy to do it. So that's kind of what this is all about, is trying to find ways of helping people find the outdoors, because it really has been, and then I've crossed paths with all you guys. So that's the other bonus too. You meet some amazing people.
You need to add also that one of the, not so much a minority anymore at all, but when I was climbing, I think there were like 3 women on the valley floor. That was it.
Right.
And a lot of women, girls at that time were very put off by, they might want to, but they were very put off by the fact that they're going to be surrounded by all these guys. And they didn't know the concept that a lot of people have of climbing is that you have to have these huge burly shoulders and you just wing your way up hand over hand. So you have to be immensely upper strength strong, and willing to fly through the air and just, grab something. And it's like, bullshit. Come on. So there are a lot more women and girls now that are willing, but I still think they need a little bit of an extra push sometimes. That women have a lot better balance generally than men, and you don't need to have all that much strength. Certainly helps, but you don't really have to if you have a really good balance.
No, that touches on something, Patty, that I remember you telling me this way back in the Robbins days. And then once I got out and was able to see it, what you were saying, it was very obvious. Carson's partner, Jennifer, is an amazing climber. Small. She's very strong for, body to weight ratio, strength to weight ratio. And there's a lot of times she'll climb circles around Carson and I. And my strength to weight ratio is really way out of whack. So, but yeah, Patty, that's a very good point, because I also do remember going up and you watch, and women tend to look at maybe a little problem on the rock, and they get through it, and they sort of work with it a little bit better, where a guy will just like grab onto a big knob and just run his way up it. And where women tends to use a little bit more finesse and work with it a lot more. It's just, and it's kind of obvious and very interesting to watch. You can kind of see it happening. But that's a very, very good point. And the representation of women in the outdoors, whether it's kayaking, whether it's climbing, and all those sort of things. It's the misnomer of being a male dominant sport. It shouldn't be, and it doesn't need to be. So yeah, that's a very, very good point. I was talking with Tamara Robbins, Royal's daughter, about kayaking, and she's, that's pretty much her world is whitewater, stuff. So very interesting.
I think it's funny. Afton and I have, we're both thin, skinny people, which is what we are, but I'm also 6 foot something and she's 5 foot something. And I look at a climb and I'm like, oh yeah, that's super easy. I run up something and she can't do it at all. And then she looks at a climb and she's like, oh, I can do that easy. And I try to get on it. I can't make the moves her body can make. Her legs go up into places where I'm like, my leg is not going there. It's just interesting the amount of moves.
Yeah,
she can do versus
very
what I can do.
technique wise. Yeah, technique wise difference.
Very
Yeah.
different.
Yeah. So there's something for everyone, for sure. And you don't really know where you're at. And then you factor in all the mind games that come into it, the physical side of it's, but I really quickly realized that the mind games that were going on, and I always use the context of, if you had a 2x6 and you lay it on the ground, I mean, you could walk up and down that thing, all day long, but you put that same 2x6 100 feet in the air, and now all of a sudden you can't do it. You physically are the same, but it's all about the mental side of it that is sometimes going to block you. And sometimes you need to try to not listen to that little voice in your head. But even though he's supposed to be your friend, but very good stuff. Very good point. So when we start talking about the early climbers, I mean, people have been climbing forever, but when you start looking at about Yosemite and stuff, I kind of go to, I mentioned Cathedral Peak. John Muir actually was the first one to summit it in 1869, and he was probably wearing what he's wearing right there. Which I look at his shoes and stuff, and I'm thinking, wow, okay, you get a little bit of my cred for that. Anybody's been up on top of Cathedral Peak, especially that last, half dozen moves, that was probably pretty sketchy for him. But so yeah, he's some of where the places that he's been would have to do a little bit of climbing, scrambling, bouldering, what have you.
He used that walking stick though for that last move.
Yeah, that last move. That's it. Yeah. Love it. All right. So we're talking about like some of Yosemite climbing, and there was a lot of, I think climbing was not even a lot of these walls, especially the bigger ones. Half Dome stands out. El Cap stands out. and they were talked to, back in the early days, nobody would ever stand on top of them. They're, especially Half Dome. You could hike up to El Cap, but Half Dome stood off by itself, and at one time said there was nobody will ever set foot on top of this thing. And yet, especially before they put the permits, there'd be 1,000 people on top of Half Dome on a Saturday afternoon. So that's that thing changed. But George Anderson was the first one to actually put something up there, and he actually drilled some holes and placed in iron bolts into the granite, so he'd give him something to hang off of, and he was using like a little rope ladder and all kinds of whatever things he could figure out. He was actually the first one to ever stand on top of it. And then Proctor came along a few years later and re-summited Half Dome, by standing on some of the old Anderson's bolts. And he was just lassoing, taking a rope and throwing up over some of the pins. Some of the ropes would just get wedged into rocks, and then he'd pull himself up on that. And so very primitive ways, but this is really considered early climbing. Then we come into a little bit later, and we started getting into more traditional styles to where it actually became an actual thing. With John Southey is one of the early pioneers of Yosemite climbing. He did what's that?
Says Chenard's a baby.
Yeah, right. He looks like a little kid. He looks like me with that first time. This is Kevin and me going caving. Actually, Kevin was only about 5 years older than me, but this guy, I mean, he had a big sewing room in his house, and he was sewing all his own backpacks and tents, and he probably had enough climbing gear for 10 people, shoes and all kinds of stuff. And this was like late 70s, and he was just amazing. I don't know where he got all that stuff and kind of got all that knowledge, but anyway, yeah, Chenard looks like a baby. But John Southey, mostly known for, the west shoulder of Half Dome, Lost Arrow Spire, which is kind of an interesting story in itself. And then the Sentinel. So he was kind of considered one of the founders of Yosemite climbing. And these were some of the big targets back in the early days. You got Lost Arrow Spire, and then Half Dome, and you try to find a good route there on either one of those. They're pretty when you're talking about the climbing side of it, portions of that. Then Royal comes along in the 50s, primarily the 50s and 60s, but in 1957 he led the first big wall in Yosemite, which they did the northwest face of Half Dome, and basically a 2,000-foot wall. And later on, he's known for putting up hundreds of routes in Yosemite. And then 10 years later, after I think it's 10 years later after he did Half Dome, him and Liz reclimbed the route to where, so she was the first woman to do Half Dome. And then later on, Royal, reset his sights on kayaking and did a bunch of first descents. And he took on kayaking with kind of the same passion. But you kind of see the gear, not really much in the way of harness, even shoes. It was a lot of, technique was still being developed. The gear was being developed. And so Royal basically started importing a lot of gear from Europe, a lot of ropes, because they were kind of where most of the high quality gear was being made. Italy, France, so forth, and trying to get climbing, the interest of climbing here in the United States, especially Central Sierra. So yeah, he's pretty instrumental in developing all that. So there's kind of some of the other aspects of him later on in life. Kayaking, you can kind of see his layout for a big wall. A lot of, you look at those and they're very primitive gear now. Just oval carabiners and pitons and bongs and hammers and all kinds of stuff. This is before the revolution of into clean climbing.
And the RRs, the blue suede shoes.
Yeah. I've got an old pair of RRs still. Yeah. Yeah. Started making his own gear. Chouinard started making his hardware. And then later on into climbing, both of them went, into clothing for sure. Yeah. A lot of climbing knowledge and history in that shot. So this is Royal's first route up Half Dome. Which I'm trying to think. I took him just a little bit over a week, I think, if I can remember right. And they got to a certain point where they realized they didn't know if, of course, it'd never been done. So until something's done, you don't know if it actually can be done. And later on, I was reading an article about getting to a certain point on the rock where you have to finish it because it's actually too much and too far to work your way back down. So it's quite a commitment and a pretty amazing story of adventure and just perseverance on that. And we all also about the same time. I hear some chuckling.
Oh yeah, what a
Harding.
character, what a
Harding,
character.
yeah.
There's some chuckling going on. Warren Harding, very interesting soul, and kind of controversial. He was sort of, I think Royal and Harding actually climbed together a bit and then sort of set off on a couple different goals. And after Royal did Half Dome, Harding says, well, okay, there's only one left. There's only one climb left in Yosemite that's higher and that's bigger and more demanding. And I'm gonna take on El Cap. So he did. He took it on, but it was very controversial, his style. And so he spent 18 months doing it. He would basically spend a couple days up on the rock, and then he would rappel. On fixed ropes. He would come right back down the valley, hang out and party for a few nights, and then take off and do another chunk. And so that really didn't sit heavy, really well with Robbins. And he's like, Robbins had the philosophy that if you step up to a climb, then you finish the climb. That's how you do it. You don't. I know that. I think Harding actually came down and had Thanksgiving dinner with his family, and and then jumped back up on the rock and sort of thing. So he had some controversy, and he would take. Yeah, he's a very, very interesting soul, but basically was known for the first one to ever climb up the nose. However you want to view that word climbing, I guess there. But this was Harding's route. And so it's, an extra 1,000 feet of climbing versus Robbins. And from that point on, I think that there was a climbing philosophy started coming into play between Robbins and Harding. Harding just whatever it took to get up. Hey, I went from here to here eventually, and Robbins really was very introspective and like decided, there's some ethics things, there's some, think kind of the way things the sport should be evolved into, and changed a lot. So anyway, that's what I've got. There's a really good book, or a really good documentary that maybe I would love to maybe get a group together. We could kind of do a group viewing of it. It's a little bit dated. Patty, you and Michael have you seen this one?
No.
Mm-mm.
It's a little bit dated. I think it was done in 2005-ish. And it's narrated by Tom Brokaw. And they basically kind of go through everything what we talked about. But it's very well put together. It's not real sensationalized and what have you. But it has a lot of narration from Royal and Harding. A lot of the characters back in that day. Chenard, Pratt, all those guys. It's one of my favorites. Actually, it's really, really well done. And so we should check this out sometime. Let's see. Let me get back here. But it's a really good one. It's a really good one. So what do you guys got? Any other thoughts?
We're the quiet ones.
You're the quiet group. I know. I get tired of listening. Here's myself.
I'll tell a little story, I guess, when I think Travis mentioned something about this. It spurred I started climbing at a rock quarry in Boston.
Okay.
All top roping, and that's what I thought climbing was. School had a outing to the Gunks. Showed up at midnight. It was dark. Woke up the next morning and so, hey, these cliffs are taller than my rope. How do we do this?
Yeah, right. Yeah, now we've got a problem, right?
Yeah.
That's great. So, Patty, so did Michael get you into climbing, or were you into climbing before that? Or
I was climbing long before I met him.
okay.
Well, I won't say long, a couple of years, I think,
Yeah.
before I met him.
Okay. And
I was climbing before I went to work at Robbins.
yeah.
And yeah, you're right. I think I started climbing right out of high school. So, and I didn't meet him until 2 years into college, a year into college, whatever. Anyhow.
Okay. That's and so what are some of the climbs that you guys have done? That kind of just
She did her first big wall with me, the column, Washington's column.
okay.
Fantastic. Grade 5, I guess we can call that a big wall, yeah. Right? Yeah.
So I've got a Washington's column story, which is a failure story. Andrew and I set out to climb Washington's column, and we spent the entire day and couldn't find the route. And so we went and had pizza and beer. That's my Washington's column story. So I remember we were so frustrated. We walked back and forth, and our guidebook and everything was like, and that's so interesting. If you think about back the old days, there were no guidebooks. You just you kind of did the search out yourself. I mean, you hear about these things, but there's nothing really. Okay, you need to get just to the left of the big cedar tree. There's a series of 3 cracks. You want to start up the middle one, kind of thing. Like we had all that and still couldn't do it. So, yeah, it's climbing's interesting. I've got a lot of failed climbs.
I always tried to incorporate good sound logistics into my climbing. When we did the column, we went up to the, what do they call it? Dinner ledge. It's only 3 or 4 pitches up.
Yeah.
Started late in the afternoon, had our little overnight bivvy there, and then left the pig. Went to the top, circled around, climbed the first 3 pitches again. I think I soloed that, and then just rappelled with the pig. Much easier than hauling it.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
There you go.
You got to think outside the box.
Oh.
I'm a small person, and hauling a pig, I hate.
Right.
I have an extending think outside of the box is we were, of course, hippies.
Yeah.
So I think it was Brennan and Henry. And
Some of the big wall.
yeah, the big wall. And we were over on the apron, and we were, I think, halfway up something. And we were climbing right next to 2 lovely young ladies who were totally topless. So I had basically no help at all from my belay people. It's like totally useless. And so look out, ladies, when you go climbing. Make sure you got a guy that'll pay attention to that belay rope.
Like me.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you never know until you're put in that position, right? You just like, okay, all right, now we just that's a great.
And I will warn people also, particularly women, but small men also. Look out who you're climbing with, because if you remember, Henry was probably at the lowest of his weights. He was probably what, 225, 230, something like that. And I was 120, 125. And so when 230 pounds falls on you,
And that's when you've belayed around your waist.
yeah, that's when
Yeah.
you had your waist belay. It's like I suddenly realized that I couldn't holler at him to get the fuck off the rope because I couldn't breathe.
Right? Yeah.
Quit looking at the ladies, get off the fucking rope. I can't breathe.
Yeah. That's right. Oh, that's beautiful. Oh, that's great. Yeah, you know, isn't that funny? I've never really, encountered that problem, but so
Oh, thank goodness for Greegees.
right, exactly. Oh, that's great stuff.
I'm going to interrupt for 1 second. I
Do
got to go
that.
to work, so I'll see you all a little later. Thank you all for joining. I appreciate
Travis.
it.
Travis, thank you so much. Hey, and I'll see you in about. I'll see you when you get there. I'm heading. Yeah. All right. Yeah. Anything else going on? So, just let's see. Let me see if I could. So I think next week our meeting is going to be. We're starting to get into. Let me get caught up here a little bit. So yeah, we started getting into a little bit of the gear. We're going to start talking about ropes and shoes, kind of the different aspects of it. I just saw, and Sam, I don't know if you've seen it, but there's Edelrid has got a new series of ropes out that they're using plant-based material on there for, and I thought, well, that's really interesting. But yet, why not? I mean, we've used vines and everything to make ropes for years, but I thought that was kind of an interesting concept to go, because you always think of synthetics and stuff like that to come into that. But
What kind of plant base?
I don't know. I need to do a little bit more research. I just happened to see a sign at the shop yesterday, and I don't know if it's a hemp-based thing or what, but I'll find that out. It's interesting. Everybody's trying to go more natural, biodegradable stuff and minimize plastics and so forth. But yeah, we'll have to see where that goes. But so yeah,
Are you
shoes.
able to eat it?
Right? Yeah, once you get to the top, then you got lunch with you. So I don't know. We'll do some research on that. Check it out.
I pulled it up right now. I can read it for you.
Yeah, Sam, go for it.
It says that they present the first synthetic climbing rope with the renewable material content of over 40%, bio-based polyamide. which is made partly from the oil of the castor plant. And some other company has significantly reduced the use of fossil fuel resources and therefore made a further pioneering achievement in the field of responsible climbing.
There you go.
Yeah.
Well, good for them. I mean,
Yeah.
Thinking outside the box again. Excuse me.
No more microplastics from the fuzzy rope sheath, right?
Yeah, exactly. Well, everybody, thanks for joining us. Boy, my throat all of a sudden is gonna go.
Very
Excuse
fun,
me.
Dave. Thanks.
Yeah.
It's unusual that I can make this time slot, but anytime I'm here on Sunday, I'll join in. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And where's Janice?
I don't know. I got a message. I think she might be on her way to Arizona. I'm not sure, but yeah, she needs to. She's usually in here with us, and we'll get that connected up. Hey, we'll cross paths with you guys too for next chance we get.
Yeah.
Thank you, Michael.
Do so.
And yeah, I'll just keep sending invites and everybody join us. Sydney, I'm jealous.
Yeah, where are
I'm
you?
really jealous.
Yeah, that was
Yeah,
fun. I could
Yeah.
ride that.
Yeah, Sydney's he's over in Bishop. So
Wow, nice.
yeah. But hey, have a safe week, everybody. Thanks for joining us. You guys are making this happen.
Nice meeting everybody.
Yeah,
You
thank
as
you,
well.
Patty. Yeah.
It was
and,
really nice to listen to y'all talk.
Let's
Thank you.
let's do this again.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
All
Thanks,
right.
everybody. Bye,
Take care,
Dave.
you
Thank
guys.
Thanks,
Okay.
Dave.
All right.
Bye, everybody.
Have a great week.